You're listening to my daddy on the PGP podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome to the first edition of this new year of the Pest Geek podcast. Happy New Year's, everybody. This is Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek. I'm so excited to be here in the new year. Little chatterbox, Sophia, she's 6 years old, and she's constantly talking in school, getting in trouble for that, and she's been asking me when can she be on the Pest Geek podcast. So I said, I'll let you do the intro. And she was so excited about that. We practiced it about 3 or 4 times. She nailed it, and I am so excited that she was able to join me on this. And I'm getting her started off right in her career in public speaking. Because I know, she's just like me. She's going to end up talking for a living. She can talk your ear off now. So I am so excited, guys, about this. It was an awesome 2014, awesome 2015, and we're getting into 2016. And we're going to start this off with a bang this year. Before I get into the podcast, I want to give a shout out to Chad Deal. He gave us a 5-star on Facebook. He gave us a really nice comment. He says, as an individual getting into the business, I was thrilled that this podcast exists. Even for those experienced in the field, it will remain useful and entertaining. His experience and wealth of information he has to share is extremely beneficial. And it manages to avoid being dull. Absolutely perfect for me to listen to it on the road, learning while I'm in my route to a job is valuable. Thank you for all the hard work. No, thank you for listening to the podcast. I really do appreciate taking the time to give us a comment like that. And also, I want to, on Twitter, I want to thank Phoenix Pest Control. Phoenix Pest Control writes, Pest Geek Podcast wrote, the label law episode was spot on. I quit my previous job because they wrote me up for not breaking the law. Hey, thanks for sharing that. Thank you for taking the time to share with us your comments, for the calls, for the emails. I'm really appreciative about that and you taking that time to do that. By the way, if you're listening to us on iTunes, would you do us a kind favor also? Will you give us a comment there, like it, just comment on it and leave us something there. That will really help the podcast out. I think in the algorithm, they do look at that and how many people are actually liking it. And, we're very thankful for you because most of our listens are from iTunes, by the way. So we're really, really thankful for you looking for us there and listening to the podcast. I want to also thank Steve Jackson from the Author podcast, the other podcast. And he's been very useful. And very helpful to me. I was on a long drive. I had to do a long commute. It was like 50 miles. And I decided to hit him up on Messenger on Twitter. And we were having a very interesting conversation about I was getting into doing restaurant cleanouts, which I've never done. I understand doing regular pest control, but we've never done a cleanout. It so happens that by the time I get there, I realize, the restaurant has been shut down. Because of the roach problem was so bad. I said, I'm really up to my earballs. And he gave me some very valuable tips on how he does it. And he gets them opened up, that day he can get them opened up. And I worked on that and I got them opened up the next day. So I want to thank Steve Jackson. They got a really goofy podcast, but those guys are not goofy at all. They're very, very serious in what they do, and they're very, very knowledgeable, and they do have a vast amount of experience. If you're listening to this podcast and you're listening to that one, it's a totally different type of podcast, but nevertheless, I've gotten a lot of it because of the little tips that they give. And I've added a lot of the things that they've recommended, and they just give little tips. They don't go in deep into things, but I think those tips are very valuable. If you really listen, you'll be able to pick up a lot. So thank you, Steve. Really appreciate all the help you gave me, man. Appreciate that. I am so excited about the future. I am excited about what we've been able to accomplish. I'm excited about what's happening, even though all the indicators are telling us that we are in serious trouble economically in this country. And there is no question that the numbers do not lie. I've been doing some analysis for a while now on the economy, and a lot of people know the economy is bad. The problem is they don't know how bad it really is and how that is affecting us as independent pest control operators. Because the reason I say independent, because when we read everything that we read in all the industry publications, everything that is read, everything that is studied, is basically based on the top 100 pest control companies in the country. And the way those companies are managed and the way things are looked at in those companies and the way the small operator has to look at things is completely different. There are a lot of things that we can learn from big companies. A lot of us came out of big companies. A lot of you came out of big pest control companies to start your own small pest control company, and you realize that the dynamics of the way you have to do things and the way it was done when you were working in a large company is totally different. And I think that when we look at the data of how the industry is growing and how things are and what projections are and what these are large companies making large projections based on things that they're doing. But I don't think a lot of us deal with the same thing, especially our clientele. I think our clientele is very different than a lot of the major pest control companies and a lot of what they're involved in that we're not involved in. So we're going to look at the state of the economy. We're going to look at the labor market for this industry. We're looking at the projections of what is happening to the industry as a whole in this podcast. So, I think it's going to be very, very informative for you. And I want to start out with the looking at the median household income and where the household income has been for the last 15 years, because a lot of people don't study history. I am a student of history, and I learned from history that human beings don't learn anything from history except to repeat it. So we need to look at history and where we are, where we've been, and where do we think we're going, that's the hardest part to do of anything. I don't pretend to be an expert on global finances. I'm an expert at my finances. I know how much I have in the bank left over at the end of the money. And usually there's too much month left over at the end of the money. And most people are in the same condition. We're just struggling by month, year by year, trying to do the best that we can with the little resources that we have available to us. And when we look at the economy, we've always known that 20% of the pest control that is purchased in this country, it's only 20% of the households that actually buy pest control in the country. It hasn't changed much. I think it's actually declined, the percentage of people that are buying residential pest control. And there's so many areas that we look at in the pest control business that sometimes we lose focus thinking that residential is the only way. There's industrial, there's commercial, there's health industry, there's the food service industry, there's the ornamental industry. Then they're down to specifics of real niches. And I think the power for the individual small company is to really niche in their marketplace and not to try to be all things to all people, as we don't have the resources to be all things to all people as a larger pest control company or a regional pest control company might have the ability to do. And So looking at this, I started looking at the incomes for the last 15 years. Where have they been? And it's a good indicator of where we are now and why we're in the situation we're in. The highest income reported in the last 20 years was recorded in 1999. That was the single most highest income year, followed by 2006, which was the second highest income year. And what do I mean by that is we look at the average household income for those every year since probably since 1967, and we see that everything had a steady incline, but there was a boom in the economy in 99, and where people made the most money. And actually, ever since then, we've made less money per year, not accounting for inflation, but actual earnings. When you account inflation, the situation is much grimmer. If we looked at the lowest income scale, the poverty scale, which is the 10%, the lowest 10%. In 1999, the lowest 10% was at 14,701. In 2014, the lowest 10% of the income scale was at 12,276. They've actually seen a 16% decline per year in their income at the lowest end. This is obviously the people who are impoverished. These are the people who are on everything on welfare. But they've seen their income decline and decline and decline even more, to the tune of losing about $2,425 per year. The second 20% of our income scale has been that, people who make around $21,000 to $24,000 a year. Well, the highest income year for them too, the highest income year for everybody pretty much was 1999. They were at $24,349. In 2014, they were at $21,432. They lost about 12%, or about $2,900 per year. The bottom 40%, which we start getting into now, where is considered to be that where we start looking at what is known as the medium household income, or the middle class. The total 20% of the scale to the highest 20% of the scale is considered the middle class. And in 1999, they were at 45,356. In 2014, that group was at 41,186. They saw a decline at about 9% of their income in that scale, or about $4,000 a year. So really, since 1999, for most people, the economy has not gotten any better. Now we get into that middle 50% of the country, the exact 50%, and that medium household income was $57,826. Today, it's $53,657, a loss of about 7% per year in income that they have not recovered from. Where would the medium household income, to account for inflation, where would they have to be at today from 1999 to 2014? The end of 2000. And the reason we got to go to 2014 is that the government does not release the previous year's data until December. So we didn't get it until December of 2015, this data. So now it's available, it's out there, and we can actually look at it. And that includes also the IRS filings and all that. In order for them to keep up with the pace of inflation from 1999 to today, to break even, they would have to be at $82,378.10. In other words, the middle of the country at $53,000, which is a little bit more than an average of $25 an hour. If you have a husband and wife working together, the 50% of America is at that price point, at that wage. which is $25.79 an hour, and the husband making somewhere around 15, the wife making somewhere around 12, because a woman still earns about 21.4% less today than the man does. So, men still they're about 78.6 to a man. So you would have to be at almost $82,500 to keep up with the rate of inflation. You can see the big problem that we have in our industry if we're dealing with homeowners, and 65% of America owns a home. It's only 64.4% of Americans own a single family home. There's about 133,957,180 single family home, actually total housing units in America. 64% of that is individual property owners. It goes to where when you get to the top 40% now of income earners, they were at $71,000, $71,591 in 1999. Today they're at $68,212, a loss of about 5%. They would have to be at $101,000 to keep up with the pace of inflation. Everybody in that bottom 60% is hurting, has been hurting, and will continue to hurt if this economy doesn't turn around. The only ones that have seen the top 20%, which used to be our biggest clients, are where we started out, the top 20% of money earners in the country was making $112,582 in 1999. That percentage of $112,262 in 2014. So the top 20% is really where the money is being made. They pretty much broke even at a negative $320. In order for them to be our customer, they would have to be at $160,000, $160,382 to be in that top 20. They don't make it with the cost of inflation. So it moves us. Here's the situation now that for residential businesses, companies dealing with residential customers, in residential pest control, in general household pests, termites are a little different, because when somebody figures out they got a termite problem, they have to do something about it, or else they're going to have a serious situation on their hands. But for general household pests, it isn't the same urgency. So if you're in general pest control and you're not into termite, you lose a lot of business. Okay. It is more complicated because now you get into, you're getting into WDOs, which the contracting is totally different, much harder to do. You have to give contracts in a lot of states. You get into fume if you're going to get into fume, if you're going to get into tentless termite treatments, if you're going to get into baiting. There's a whole lot of things that you can do, and depending on the state that you're in, the state's going to have different requirements for you getting into that field. So it gets a little bit more complicated to do, but it's totally different. But so now we get into the top 10%, and here's the problem: where it used to be the 20% of homeowners used to buy the majority of pest control, now it's down to 10% because the income has not kept up with inflation. And if you're making $100,000 in your house, a lot of people who are making $20,000 say you're rich. You're really not. I mean, the bottom 50% of Americans do not contribute but less than 3%, around 3% of the total taxes in this country. The taxes in this country, the 50% of the taxes in this country, are paid by the top 50%. 80% is paid by the top 50%. So you're hurting because you're paying taxes. Your chances are you're in a bigger home and you can afford a bigger home and you're paying more property taxes. So your level of inflation and your affluence really hasn't grown if you're in that 112. So now you move into the top 30%. And this is where it gets all crazy, especially in an election year like we're having, where this is being talked about. And this seems to be the whole pitting against the poor with the ultra rich. And it turns into a class envy thing when it shouldn't be. That's not the intention. Our intention here is to understand where the economy is, where our customers are coming from, to understand how we strategize based on this. Back in 1999, 10% of the wealthiest people in the country were making $153,144. In 2014, that percentage grew to 157,479. They saw a 3% increase in their income in that bracket, or $4,300 a year in increase. When you get to the 5%, it was 201,770. It's 206,568, or an increase of 2%, or 4,798. Where it gets really, really crazy, it's when you get to the top 1% of the moneymakers. And this is not even going down to the top 0.5% of the millionaires. These are not millionaires. I mean, they're probably millionaires on paper. But these are not people making, $3 million, $10 million, $12 million a year. That's a small percentage of our population. We're talking about the top 1%, when they were making $293,415. These are your doctors. These are your lawyers. These are your high-level engineers making these kind of money. People who are in the they're in their middle 50s, getting into their 60s. They've worked all their life, and they're living now off of a lot of investment income. They went from $293,415 to $428,713. They had an increase of 46%. The top 10% saw an increase average of about 51% in income, while the lower 50%, the lower 90% of the country saw a decrease in their income. So the top 1%, if you're in the residential business, is who you need to be going after. They're the ones with the money. That's what it comes down to. And the trouble is, a lot of people are struggling with the cheap pest control. The $35, the $65 pest control. And when you go after these kind of customers, all you end up doing is leaving money on the table. Because they're expecting a higher level of service, a higher level of treatment, a higher level of customer service overall. And when you show up with the 1985 beat-up truck to do their lawn, they're thinking, really, am I really going to pay what this is worth? A lot of the time, you can't go after these people because your sales skills aren't there to go after them. You need to upgrade your sales skills. You need to upgrade your customer service skills. You need to upgrade your service that you provide, the quality that you provide. Everything needs to be upscaled in order to sell to that client base. Your education level has to rise. They can perceive when the person they're talking to is knowledgeable about what they're doing or not knowledgeable about what they're doing. Perception to them is reality. When you drive a Bentley, when you wear a Rolex, you're telling the world. When you drive a $168,000 Mercedes, you're telling the world, I'm somebody, I've arrived. I live in this house, I drive this car because I can. And they're expecting those that sell to them, do business with them, to be somewhere at a higher level. So the middle class has shrunk. Who used to buy, the upper middle class, who used to buy a lot of this service, went from the 20% down to the 10% because they can't keep up because of inflation. I mean, two people making $50,000 a year each is not really a ton of money. And that's what they're doing. And when you have to decide to piano lessons at $65 a month to $100 a month, or pest control, you're going to choose the piano lessons over the pest control. That's the reality. That's the economy. To coin the phrase, it's the economy, stupid. And we have to learn how do we up our A game to go after that clientele. Because here's the other side of the coin. The industry isn't growing anymore. Pest control technicians. Actually, it's in a decline right now from companies hiring pest control technicians. Back in December 12 of 2012, the National Pest Management Association put out their view of where the pest control industry was going. And they predicted that between 2010 and 2012, there will be a 26% in the amount of pest control people being hired. The industry would grow by 26%. In January of 2014, PCT Online said that the industry would grow to 86,000 by 2020. Well, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has just recently put out their prediction on the industry. And they're actually, between 2014 and 2024, they're estimating that the industry will lose about 900 jobs, reducing it to about 73,200 pest control workers in the country. The funny part is that both of these got their data statistic from the same Bureau of Labor Statistics. Unfortunately, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has downgraded the industry. So there's not a whole lot of new jobs in the pest control industry if you want to get out now and go work, unless you're highly skilled. If you're looking to get in, it's going to be very tough. Why? Because what we're seeing in the industry is a lot of mergers and acquisitions. 20-year-old companies are selling to big giant conglomerates. They can't see themselves growing anymore. They've stifled, they don't see it, and they've decided to cash out. And that was their exit strategy to get out of their business. And you need to have an exit strategy for your business. I know what you're thinking. My exit strategy is going to be a coffin. Well, I have an exit strategy for my company. I wanted to grow it to a certain amount, and then I know, because I know that I'm going to be able to only take it so far based on my knowledge, based on my skills. And then I want to retire, and I want to live off a beach somewhere. Oh, wait, I already do that. I live in South Florida. Okay, I want to live at a better beach somewhere. So the industry isn't growing. The last year, PCP put out, I think it was 3.3%, mostly due to bedbug business and increase in commercial from these mergers. Where are the most pest controls, and where is most of the pest control business in the country? Well, it's actually in the South, all over the South. Florida, California, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina. That entire South belt is where most of the pest problems are, and where expected most of the pest problems will increase due to the amount of invasives and temperature rises. I mean, if global warming is true, if it can be scientifically proven that it is, I'm not convinced yet, then we should see an increase in the South in business, in growth, based on global warming. Because, what pest needs are warmer temperatures. And we've seen an increase in certain bugs due to our temperature pattern changes that we've had over the last 4 years. I've seen the difference in the calls that I get. When I used to get purely ants, now I'm getting a ton of American roaches. It's growing. Most of the calls I get now are large roaches when it used to be just ants. So where are the jobs? Well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Florida is the number one employer of pest control technicians at about 9,100. Then it's California with about 9,050, Texas 5,230, Georgia 3,650, and North Carolina at 3,030 pest control technicians. Florida continues to lead the way in low wages in the country at $14.75 per hour, or $30,680 per year for the average pest control technician. The highest here is California at $16.29, or $33,890 per year. So California is doing very, very well. Florida and California have the largest amount of pest control technicians. Where are the highest paid pest control technicians? Well, they're in Vermont. There's a whole 50 of them there. And they're making $22.25 an hour, or $46,270. And they're actually the highest paid, actually Massachusetts with 1,050 pest control technicians. Now, I don't know about you, but about $8 an hour difference, or about $16,000 a year to freeze my tail off in Vermont isn't going to get me to move there to become a pest control technician. I am so sorry, Vermont, but I am not coming to you. I think I'll take my chances here in the South. Washington was at 710 technicians at 1998, and South Dakota with 60 technicians at 1928. There's not a whole lot. I mean, I'm sure these numbers are actually a lot higher in the real world, because a lot of people don't track stuff right. A lot of people are paying, especially here down in the South, there's a lot of people working for cash who are not being counted, who are, the amount of illegal immigration, all that has really affected us down here with prevailing low wages. I mean, it's just a reality. It's not to be mean-spirited. I'm a Cuban. I'm the son of Cuban immigrants. I came to this country when I was 1 year old, and back in 1971, I was here in this country. We did come legally to this country, but the over amount of illegal workers in this country really is affecting, and especially here in South Florida, where 65% of the people that are here Hispanic, only 18% are considered to be Anglo-Saxon, about 18%. The rest are African Americans and Asians and people from other countries who are here, but the majority of the percentage is. And when you have a densely populated area of one type of minority, it does create a huge labor problem. And a lot of people down here are fighting for the $15 an hour wages, which us in the pest control business is not really going to affect us that much, but it is going to affect all of our clients, especially if you're in the commercial business. And when you all of a sudden are a sub shop making sandwiches, and you're hiring high schoolers for $8 an hour, and now you got to hire somebody at $15 an hour to do the exact same job and hire a high schooler, the dynamics are going to change a bit, and the economy can't handle that right now. And I don't think that's a wise idea to be talking about $15 an hour minimum wages. I think most states in most industries pay their people more than that. When I worked in Ohio back in the early 90s, McDonald's was paying $8 an hour in 1994. Couldn't get people to work at night, so they were paying them $9 an hour. So I think it's only in certain areas of the country where people are really screaming about this. I think it is, for the lower end of the 20% who are making, or, the lower 10% of the income scale making that $12,000 a year. Yeah, you're going to be hurting. You're always going to be hurting. And the reality is that they're always going to be with us. And I think as business people, as people who of faith, we obviously have to do something for those who are less capable than we are. I grew up in that system. I grew up in that $12,000 a year with a single parent. My father died when I was 5. And after shortly 4 years after getting to this country, we were on public assistance. We were on welfare because my mother, by herself, uneducated, could not speak English or read English, worked in a factory for $1 something an hour. And we lived in public housing. And I lived that way until I was about 18 years old, because from the age of 10 to the age of about 17, my mom was dealing with me and my cancer. So I understand the living in a bad economy. I understand living with nothing. I understand, not having a penny to rub against anything else, much less rub together. So, but I don't think that the way to go about it is to impose on just like I am totally against the Obamacare. I don't think imposing on the rest of the country to purchase insurance for the bottom 4% of people who can't afford it. I mean, if the government would run their Medicare and their Medicaid correctly, but the government's proven they can't run anything effectively, I don't think we'd be in this situation. And I'm one of those people that doesn't qualify for insurance. And I'm telling you, it's a bad idea. It's socialized medicine is our next step. And the reason I know is because I deal with Central, South America, the Caribbean, and I've dealt with it for decades, in both professionally and personally. This is not the way to go about it. So I think that where are the opportunities for us as pest control people, as independents, as people who run small companies, with 1 to under 10 employees? You have to look at new markets. You have to develop new strategy. I think with the amount of merger and acquisitions there has been this year, we've seen actually a decrease in the amount of people being hired in the pest control industry, down by 2%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. By the way, I've got tons of links on the website. And if you want to take a look at all these links, all this data is validated from the sources I got them from, so you can look at the numbers. But a major acquisition and a merger was this year last year with the merger of the Brinkman Group and Valleycrest became the nation's largest commercial landscape business. You're saying, well, what does that have to do with pest control? The fact is that they have their own pest control people. They have CPOs on staff. They have arborists on staff. They have horticulturists on staff. And with duplication, you're not going to need 2 CPOs. You're going to need less. You're not going to need, with duplication, you might not need 2 pest control people with these large mergers. I was part, back in the middle 90s, I was part of a major merger and acquisition. I was in the auto glass industry at that time. I was a regional manager. I handled everything east of the Mississippi. So the majority of the U.S. I handled. And I remember when that merger was going to take place. This was between two large manufacturers of glass who also happened to be in the installation and retail of glass. And they were competing with these little mom and pops. I've been in that industry. I understand as a large guy how a large company can destroy the small mom and pop. And I understand how the mom and pop has to survive against giants. When I was in that industry, it was a $2 billion company at that time. And we were going to merge with an equal size company, becoming basically a $4 or $5 billion company. And there was 3 of us on this side, 4 of us on this side, 3 of them on that side in our division that handled what we handled. I'd handled about $13 million worth of contracts with subcontract mom and pop shops to install our auto glass. And they did the same. And I had figured out a way how to get more of a competitive price to the tune of about 20% more than the other glass companies were getting, negotiating with these mom and pop shops. And they all sat around the table, and we were getting ready for, they were all talking about their plans because they knew they were going to get let go. They've already been told before the merger happened. And they were all talking about how, they could sit around the table and talk about their where they went. I got a degree, I got a master's, from Purdue, and I've got a master's from this college and that college, and and we're sitting all there, and I'm the only guy without a major college degree. I've got an AA in business from a little unknown college in Fort Lauderdale. And they start talking about how much they get for their glass. Oh, we get 65% off the list price, and we pay this much for labor and this much for kits. And everybody's looking around looks at me, and I'm like, what? And I said, how much do you get? And I said, well, I get about 85% with no labor and no kit. and they're all looking at me like, is he for real? Is he bragging? And no, all the other senior, which were on top of me, said, no, that's what he gets. And, I've always been an opportunist. I know where to find the throat in any business and be able to find where the profitable businesses are. And I did that when I had a paging business, when, every company had a contract. I had no contract. I was way ahead of what Metro PCS was doing in that business, where I had no contract, and we retained all our customers. This whole issue that, if you have a contract, you don't have a contract, that makes a huge difference. It really doesn't, unless you're planning to sell to a major player. And even then, it doesn't really matter, because you're still going to have an amount of rescission that customers cancel at that point if they don't like the service after a year. So it doesn't really matter to me. I can provide high-end quality service where I retain most of my customers. We don't lose customers because some other company comes in with a lower price. It's not an issue. So where do we have the opportunities? I mean, Elric and Rent-A-Kill are buying up companies everywhere. They just finished buying a major one down here that they just purchased. You got Arrow Exterminators buying up a ton of companies. Massey Services, which is a regional company down here, just started buying in Georgia and Texas. They're buying companies. They're expanding through acquisition. And when you expand through acquisition, you basically reduce the amount of people needed because of duplication. And that's what's happening, is the market is stagnant. They can't grow. Nobody can grow. So everybody is buying each other out. And the large companies are buying these small regional companies who they don't feel they can hand off their business to their sons or their family or sell it to anybody else. And they'll sell it to a large major company for a major buyout and have a beautiful retirement. That is what's happening. So where are the opportunities? Well, if you look at the oldest segment of our society, which is the elderly, I think there is huge money to be made with the elderly, because they are the most affluent of all the people. They do have the majority of the money. They can and they will have to spend a lot of it in their elderly years, and they're really concerned about their health. Elderly people are just as susceptible to pesticides as young people are, or children, because of their age. And I think in home health care, there's a great opportunity for pest control in home health care, dealing with these type of customers who don't want to deal with large companies. And there's a reason why these people, you're either buying from a large company or you're buying from a small independent. The other middle companies are somewhere in between. Marketing to women more effectively has to become a priority. The problem we have with these small companies and independent companies and one-man companies is that they don't understand marketing. And they don't understand that the women in the household are making, they're making less, but they're contributing majorly. With tight budgets, they're making a lot of decisions of where the money gets spent. They know where the money gets spent and what's needed in a home. And most of the calls, 90% of the calls that I get from women. So marketing to women, from day one, I've been saying it in our business, we got to market better to women. Because that's where, if a woman doesn't want you in the house, if you've got not the right look and she feels feels intimidated or feels like, you're not getting in that house. You're not going to get that business. So you got to become very good at marketing to women, understanding the high pressure tactics don't work well with women. And using the same high pressure, talking about insects and bugs and poop and all that you discuss with men, discusses women. And you have to change the vocabulary. Commercial food service, major, because when you can buy food cheaper than you can make it at home and you're super busy, guess what? Food retail has skyrocketed in this country because of that. When you can manufacture something cheaper than you can make it at home, you're going to eat out, especially if you're busy. So I think looking at food service industry, we're looking very, very seriously at the food service industry right now, trying to design a superior service than what we see out there and what we've done. We've been in it. We don't have a major focus on that. My major focus, 95% of my major focus has always been in ornamentals. As that number slips because of of properties down here, we've been hit really hard. We need to get into other markets or we need to get into newer territories that are strictly high end where everybody drives a Bentley. I mean, that's the reality. Bed bug service is going to be big. It continues to be big. I think most of the increase in business has been in bed bug service. I continue to see that. And the eco-friendly. And to be genuinely eco-friendly, I think it's a major concern as more and more people, more and more products, other non-related products hit the industry about being eco-friendly. More and more people are in tune to it, and more people are willing to pay for it, especially that top 1%. So there's the State of the Union address that I gave for everybody. I hope you guys have a killer 2016, that you guys rock it this year. I am so happy to be in this industry, to be where I am, doing what I do. I do see the opportunities in spite of all the challenges. I think the challenges make us sharper, make us better, to be able to come up with new and exciting products and services for clients that really make a difference in people's lives. So I hope you guys are doing well. I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for tuning in. By the way, we had a record new year for the Pest Geek podcast. We've doubled in just 1 month our audience, and we're getting calls from everywhere in the union. We're getting email from lots of people who are thanking us for this. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you so much for listening, for sharing the podcast, that this is useful to you and other people, helps everybody grow in the industry. And I'm really thankful for this. So thank you for the opportunity. Guys, have a great one. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.